Hurst.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Standridge.
Here.
Representative Clark. Representative Crawford. Representative Jones.
Here.
Representative Fiddler. Here. Representative Hammett.
Here.
Representative Harrison.
Here.
Representative Stubbs.
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
All right, thank you. First bill up is HB 470. Mr. Pro Tem, is he in the room?
Right here.
Come on, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. This is a bill that we need to start this process. This is going to be a long process, but it's an outgrowth of the reapportionment committee and the work on redrawing districts. The courts basically told us in 2017, that last lawsuit, that we had to draw districts using whole voting precincts. Okay, and what we discovered. I was trying to draw using whole voting precincts. I'm going to pull Limestone County here. I've got a precinct in Limestone County that has 25,316 and one that has 839 people in it. Shelby County, 16,952, 11,126, and one that has 624, and one that has 823. Lee County, 17,000, 18,000, and 538. What you're seeing is a massive disparity in the numbers within the county. And what this bill simply states, and we're going to have to work our way through in the next year or so, that you take the county population, divide by the number of precincts your county has, get a mean, and try and get your precincts as close to that mean as possible, plus or minus 5%. Same thing we do in legislative redistricting. That gives us some continuity when we're drawing these plans on the size of the voting precincts in the county. I know that's a very simplistic solution. It's not going to be that easy. I think Sam probably understands this because precincts have to stay inside the cities, and sometimes it's very complicated. But what we're also going to ask you to do is insert language into this, and we're going to that says visible boundaries is defined by the Census Bureau when you draw a voting precinct. In the extremely rural counties, and it kind of makes sense in a way, they'll use a section line as a boundary. Well, that's just a line that runs through the woods that's not defined normally. And it makes it very difficult for us to draw plans based on that. But we need, under the Census Bureau, we have to have defined boundaries. A road, a creek, a power line. There's something that's definable that we use. What we're going to ask you is we come up with a plan that brings the voting precincts in line with the Census Bureau data that they need. Because before the census, we have to take all the counties and send them our census data, our voting precincts, so they can do the census. Then they send it back to us, and that's how we draw. All right? And what we're trying to do is make what we have in Alabama line up closer to what the federal government sends back to us so that our numbers are more accurate and it's easier for us to draw these these legislative districts and congressional districts and whatever other districts, because we draw districts for many of the counties and cities, everything else. But this is a very complicated process. It's going to take time. I've asked the chairman and y'all put this in one of your subcommittees, and let's begin the process of working on it and see if we can get something next year. But between now and next year, I really want to spend some time because I'm out of reapportionment litigation, so I have nothing else to do.
All right, and that's what we're going to do. The governmental services sub, Troy Stubbs, you chair that committee. Kerry, Representative Underwood was a member on that. I'm going to put Representative Standridge on there. So if you would, I'm going to send that to your committee. If y'all would get the meeting under any other instructions or information that he may have, and report back to us, I guess, throughout the year. Maybe we'll touch base.
I like Sam.
So those members on there would be Sam, and then Representative Crawford, Ben Harrison, and then David Stanton. You got some good wisdom.
I just had one question about, as you know, sometimes there's a barrier of precincts meeting ADA accessible, and and sometimes you got parts of areas in the county where it's real difficult to find. And then you have some, at one time, we had a lot of churches. Some have said, we don't want you to have a precinct here anymore. And so how do we plan to deal with those situations?
I'm trying to peel one onion at a time. I'm just trying to get the precinct boundaries. I'm gonna let the probate judge or the election figure out where they're gonna have the voting precinct itself. I'm just trying to work on making the boundaries more user-friendly for everybody, more continuity around the state. But, you know, you gotta leave the counties, give them some leeway and some free, you know, it's their counties, their voting precincts. You know, on our end, it makes it very difficult to try and draw a legislative district when you've got two voting precincts together exceed the population of one house district. And right next to it, you got two with 27,000 people in them. And you got here that has 800. We're gonna have to break a voting precinct up, you know, in order to get it within our deviations, because they're so massive.
And your target is for January 1?
Well, we've got about a year and a half to get something done, because the counties have to redraw, because by somewhere around 2027, 2028 at the latest, we have to send the data to the federal government for the census, so they can put all the census blocks together, and then start the process of the census, so they can gather the information and send it back to us.
Representative Boyd.
Yeah, those of us who sit on the reapportionment committee know and understand that this is complicated. There's communities of interest so in the past, I think what you're saying to us, counties have just been drawing them. That's correct. And so you wanna do the first step of trying to get it lined up, which is, his point was great. There's so many other points that we know, but this is good because consistency makes a whole lot of sense.
But I don't want to be heavy-handed. I want the counties to have the freedom to draw the, I mean, you know, they're different precincts, but I do want to have a little consistency, and particularly the identifiable boundaries.
And that's more important than the population report?
I'd like to see them level out a little bit, but there might be a reason. I mean, there might have a
Most
very
of it's
justifiable
geographic.
reason that precinct is one city. And the reason why it's not as big as the other one, it's a city, it's a community. And that's the reason, which makes perfect sense. So, like I said, this is peeling an onion. We're gonna work on it for a long time.
Hey guys, I wanna add a little more, diversity in that. I'm gonna put, Representative Clark on that committee too, to help with that. That way everybody has representation. So,
Great.
thank you. I
Thank y'all.
appreciate you. Yes, sir.
Of course, stay in touch with me.
Yeah, you got
Thank you.
All right, next bill up is SB 70, Senator Orr. It's 270, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. I guess, wait, I've got a,
It's just a mic,
Oh,
so
it's
we
for
can
you.
hear
I
it.
just don't wanna knock it off. with
That's
the
okay, you
mic.
can leave it there.
Set it right here.
Oh, yeah, that's fine,
Okay,
that's fine.
alright, thanks. Alrighty, let's see. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me here, and it is my honor and pleasure to, bring you, SB 270, appearing this for Senator Orr here in the House. And this is, the public records bill that we've been working on for a couple of years now, or maybe longer. I've been working on it for a couple of years. It's an Alabama Press Association, Alabama Broadcasters Association bill that has been worked on and weighed in by many, many different interest groups, the league, county commission, universities, school boards, governor's office, and probably I'm leaving out some. All representing different points of view and interests, and so I feel like having all those people weigh in, we've got a really good.
Did you get everybody happy?
Actually, at the moment, yes, everybody's happy. They end up today, but we got it through Senate last year, got it through a committee in the House last year, and before we could get on the House floor, there at the 11th hour, there was an issue from the governor's office with just a conflict with some other provision that we had to stop and work on this year. So now everybody's back together, and hopefully we can finish it this year. So why do we bring this bill? Basically, all this bill really does and addresses is gives timelines, to our current open records law. Okay, currently there is a reasonable time is the timeline that we have in the law, and that, as you can imagine, creates lots of confusion and, difficulties between the requester and the people having to provide the records. So this bill gives timelines, and basically, the first timeline is it gives 10 business days to acknowledge the receipt of a request for a public record, and then 15 days from that day, these are business days, to provide the information, and either to fulfill the request or to deny the request. And then the question becomes, well, what if it's one of those very time-intensive requests, and then there are provisions in the bill for that, and if that's the case, they basically have to notify the requester that it will take, some time, and they can request an extension in 45-day increments up to 270 days, and really even beyond that if everybody's in agreement and working together. So that's some of the main timelines. In addition, there is a provision for frivolous requests. A public officer shall not be obligated to respond to public records requests that is vague, ambiguous, overly broad, or unreasonable in scope. And so those are some of the main things that this bill addresses. And then, we need to vote on the bill, and then there's a sub also.
All right, well, let's address the sub.
And just to verify, because you do probably have two of your folders, the proper sub is, the documentation number on the top left is gonna be the 1C5VZ33-1. Because there had been another one, and so there may be two in your folder.
Yes,
So
yes.
1C5VZ33-1 is the one Ms. Allen will be going over that.
Got a few edits on the front page. Changes citizen to resident.
Everybody with me? So the changes from how it came out of the Senate to the sub that you have before you are the following. First of all, LSA recommended that we change the word citizen to resident, and everybody agreed on that. Go into more detail, that changes in there. The additional discretion to charge a fee, so that the provider of the information can charge a reasonable fee to the requester for their time and expenses. Added an exception for presumed denial, and then there are several minor changes to words and phrases that were inadvertently left out from the previously agreed upon sections. So those are the main changes in the sub. And I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions that I can answer, or otherwise would ask for a favorable.
All right, any questions on the sub? Do I hear a motion? All right. All right. And a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now, any questions before we make a motion on the sub as adopted? Adopt
Well,
the bill as sub. I
No,
mean,
we adopt the sub, so we have to call roll call. You have to do roll call
Okay,
for that.
all right, we do have to do a roll call on that.
Or just put voice messages.
Okay, go ahead. All right,
Dr. Boyd made the motion, Fiddler seconded to adopt the sub.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We'll do the sub, give it a favor. All right,
So we can discuss.
discuss it.
Okay, so whenever I read it, and I read the definitions of standard request, which is on page 4, on line 86.
Okay.
Standard request, a public records request that seeks one or more specifically and discreetly identified public records that the public officer determined would take less than 8 hours of staff time to process, considering the time needed to identify and retrieve any responsive records. And then, on page 5, line 122, A time-intensive request is defined as a public records request that the public officer determines would take more than 8 hours of staff time to process, considering the time needed to identify, retrieve, and responsive records. So my question, when I read standard request, I'm thinking a standard request that I remember coming into our city would be something that would take our city clerk 2 hours, an hour, 30 minutes to process. And so when I read this definition, 8 hours or less, I'm thinking that's an entire day that they've taken out of, you know, the city or the county or whoever's time. So I wondered if that shouldn't be lower. But as I read that and think about how that affects the rest of the document, it might be an adverse effect. But I wanted to get your comments on that and thoughts.
I'm gonna attempt to answer your question, and I have the experts behind me that can, with the chairman's permission, correct me if I misstate something. But basically, first of all, you have 10 days to acknowledge the response, okay? So you got 10 days to sort of figure out what kind of request is this and about how much time is this going to take me to answer. If during that time, and then you get your 15 days to respond, okay, after that. So if you get to the end of that 15 days and you realize this is going to take more time, you basically can begin to, with your 45-day extensions after that, up to 270 days. So I'm not sure why we drew the bright line between, with 8 hours between sort of standard and then time intensive, but the way I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that either way, at the end of the day, you need more than the 15 days to respond to a 7-hour request, for example. Then you can request more time and under the way the bill is written.
Seems like a lot, you know, of time. And then, of course, I've read the City Clerks Association's issues with it. And I really, I don't know, I think I'm okay with that. It was just the definition seemed. In our city, we have a policy, or we go by state statute, that says you get 7 days and we're gonna give you your feedback within 7 days. And we adhere to that pretty well. And then we charge back, I guess we have an internal policy, we charge back the extra time over a certain amount. Like if it takes more than an hour or so to, you know, garnish those records or garnish those records, then that is sent back. So this is actually more lenient than our city,
Yeah.
and I'm talking about the city of Fairhope, is actually doing right now.
And so you can keep doing that in Fairhope. So you don't have to do this as long as you're responding more quickly or in a more timely manner. But for those that don't have standards or have longer standards, then you have to comply with this.
Well, that was the only question I had, was that so, you know, we can, I don't know if that would make a difference or it'd be more detrimental to change that definition. Just seems like a long time,
Yeah.
taking 8
I was
hours.
wondering, Leslie, and,
Hours off of somebody's, you know, to be, and that would be called reasonable or standard. Because in my mind, standard, that definition just sounds like that's a normal request, when it's not. That would be abnormal. That would be, you know, something much more longer than it usually takes to do our requests that we get in, I think, from to the cities or in the county.
You know, it really wasn't defined as to what's reasonable. That's all I saw in here was a reasonable, and the public officer just comes up with a number, right? They try to base that upon the hours, estimated hours.
Well, currently, I'm not sure what you're referencing. The current law says that the provider has a reasonable amount of time to respond to the requester. And this law is trying to put in timelines where we don't have any right now. Now, there may be another reasonable spot. in here.
Reasonable as to the fees charged to the
Fees charged.
requester. Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
That's
What do they typically do now?
There's no cap, what I saw, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
May I
if I may.
call it on co-counsel?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Mr. Harrison, the members of the committee, the
This is Brad England.
Yeah, I'm
with
sorry,
the
with the Press Association. With that, the reasonable as far as the cost, the reason why we didn't try to, it's not so much about setting the cost for this bill, it's more dealing with the timelines. And so someone that's charged with producing this in Elba, Alabama, for instance, probably are gonna be paid a little bit different than someone who's doing the same thing in Huntsville, Alabama. So we didn't try to get into establishing like a per hourly wage or anything like that.
And that's really not the problem now. You don't
No,
have
sir,
that issue
it's not the problem. And the question regarding, the 8 hours, that is, again, that was something that we were trying to put that would help even those that say, again, I'm gonna reference Elba because that's my hometown. Let's say the clerk is there 2 days a week and half a day each day. So for her, trying to juggle that 8 hours may be critical for her. And as Representative Allman mentioned, that's fine. You can, your idea of what your typical way of handling that kind of request, it can be 4 hours, it can be 3 hours. If you have the minutes from the last school board meeting, in your desk drawer, someone comes in and asks for them, and you take it and hand them a copy, you're more than welcome to do that. You don't have to hold it for 8 hours. So it's within that kind of framework, you can establish your own internal guidelines like like Fairhope obviously has. So you don't have to hold that for 8 hours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but when I just hear the definition of standard request, to me, that says, this is your normal request timeline, and then you take anything that's less than 8 hours, and to me, the definition just seems off to me. But
I know,
it just might be me.
and different groups had different concerns as related to that, so we were just trying to bring something together that everybody could agree on, so.
And that's what they do,
Yeah.
8 hours.
That's where we came to. So.
All right, any more questions?
I got a question. Representative Almond, I wanted to ask you, I've had some contacts from some town clerks and things with concerns, and I know y'all looked at that and what I understand. And also got a concern from a local police chief that he's real professional, does a great job, and I listen to him a lot, about things dealing with his department. And he had some concerns that, as I read the bill, I'm not sure that is so. I just wanted to see, did y'all take that into consideration with the law enforcement part, when you're working on they're not gonna be required to meet certain things if it's a sensitive investigation, and that's
Right, this does not change what is discoverable and what is not, does not change that at all.
Okay, I think that was some of
Yes.
issue,
Yes,
and then the other
does not.
issue I just want to ask you about, and I just want to verify from what I've read, but he also has, in his talk, he said, I do understand that we're real sensitive to this for a couple of reasons, but one reason is, he said, we get these, and you've addressed it a little bit, I think, in your opening, but we get these mass requests, or what it said, well, we want you to send us, every person and all the information about every investigation you've ever done for a burglary. You know what I mean?
Right.
That you've done over 5 years, or, they'll get a request like that. So you think that would take care of it, that segment that you mentioned, the frivolous section?
Yes, and they can, there is a form in here that the requester that provider can use or require the requester to use, or some version closely resembling that form, first of all. And so I think if something's overly broad, University of Alabama's here, they get this all the time, I think, particularly with the football team, and questions about, you can imagine, this voluminous request for information. So you can ask them to narrow the scope.
it's specific and not.
Or you can just deny it for being overly broad and then say why, and
Based
then
on
they
this
can come
section
back.
of the law that we would create if we passed it? Based
Well,
on this frivolous
I-
section or another section?
It's right there. It's also at the back of the form. It's in the middle of the form. If you turn to the very back, it's embedded in there. So it should take care of that. It should address that.
I just, think about that. I mean, I don't have an issue with the bill. I just wanna make sure that we don't cause an issue.
Well, that's one of the reasons why they did this, because of that very issue that many providers have, is with these frivolous requests that they can't possibly, respond to. They have manpower.
Yeah, they're there, the police chief and the staff, or doesn't matter, it could be county, it could be anybody, that they come up with that, and you're like, okay, what do we do here? We don't wanna be in violation of this law we have. I don't want this on me, I'm the clerk, or I'm the, whoever, and I don't, there's no way I can meet this, but I don't wanna be in violation of this law, so I just wanna be sure we're clear.
Well, and we are trying to have a proper balance between the requester, who currently can make a request and get no response from the provider, and they have no idea if it's being denied or what's happening. So this requires a response, okay? Trying to be responsive to the needs of the requester. After 10 days, if the requester hasn't heard one way or the other, the burden is on them to follow up and, determine whether it was in fact denied. But beyond that, putting in timelines, and which really helps the provider, they've got to comply, but it also gives them some reasonable period of time to comply. So trying to find that balance.
Any more questions? All right. As adopted, bill as sub.
Okay, one more question. But this came from the city clerk
Okay.
group, so you may be prepared to answer this.
All right.
Since there's no real definition of a public record, because, and I talked to a little bit about this, because, and their point is, they're saying the present law talks about public writing, and we're moving it to public record, which opens up a boatload of different types of records that were not originally intended to be public. And she says records such as draft notes, electronic records such as text, phone logs, call recordings, police videos, records. While there's probably not a great definition of the term public writings, did have some limitation that this definition, public records in this bill, does not. Does that make sense?
Well, I saw that question in the letter, and what I'm told is, first of all, the courts have determined that public writing and public record are one and the same, okay? This bill does not change what is discoverable, or what type, just like they referenced, that doesn't do any of that, doesn't change any, doesn't add things that aren't already discoverable. And we use the term public record rather than public writing, because nobody really knows what a public writing is, and everybody uses the term public record, so. But it does not change.
Yeah, that broad inquiry, not gonna be
It does not.
videos.
So it's the same standard we're under now.
Same standard, exactly.
I
Mr.
know.
Chairman, may I just say, I've been on both sides of this issue, and, I think this is a very good bill. It is generous. I'm not sure I would like it so much when I was a reporter, because you want things and need things right away. You've got editors pushing you, saying, I need that story now. This is very generous for those who have to provide that information. I think it's a very good bill.
I think it helps.
Yes.
All right, I have a motion, I have a second.
Oh, it's a second. At first, just a motion.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise, bill's given a favorable report.
Thank you very much.
All right, next bill up is SB 223. Senator Hoare. All right. SB 323, Senator Hoare. Anybody gonna represent? All right, yeah, are you representing?
Not Senator.
Price, I'm sorry, Price. That's the third mistake I made today. Y'all gonna kick me out.
Through me. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But you did know
Thank
your bill
committee
number.
members.
Yeah.
This is gonna be the shortest bill you'll see today. It's all on one page. It's, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and present this. This is Senator Price's bill. He came to me yesterday and asked me to present it for him because he had a couple of other obligations. This bill is in relation, it's very strictly drawn. Anthony had put it together, and it's pretty strictly drawn, so it probably won't run into anything else. The source of money is specified in here. The fact that you have to be in bankruptcy proceedings or foreclosure proceedings is put in here. And to start with, the county commissioners were upset with it, but there's a time, there's a deadline, a time when it expires, which is about a year and a half. And after that was added, the commissioners were satisfied with the content of the bill and the fact they did not think it would overlap with anything. So what it does is if a facility goes into foreclosure or whatever, or bankruptcy, the state funds will be put in escrow that have been going to that facility will be placed in escrow to protect them until it is over with. And we know how long court proceedings can drag on sometimes, but state funds would be placed in an escrow account to protect them. And so that's the whole gist of it. If you have any questions, I would be glad to attempt to answer your questions.
Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
All in favor?
What brought this about?
There is a facility over in our district that is possibly fixing to go under either bankruptcy or foreclosure hearings. There is a flow of funds going to that, and this is an attempt to protect the public funds that are flowing in there while the whole situation is being settled in the courts. If that,
This is the only way that.
this was the only way. This is how it was suggested we approach this. Down the road, when we know a little bit more about which direction this thing is going, you may see a local bill next year to deal with this. But we were told we had to do it in this manner right now to do this. Or he actually, the senator negotiated.
Representative Clark, Representative Boyd, you have a question?
I was looking at the Senate note, which you just explained,
Yes.
but my question told by whom that this would be the way to go.
In discussions, Senator Price was told. He negotiated this with, and Anthony had input into it, so. And the feelings is it will not overlap into any other situation. There will probably be no situation like this come up, that this would affect at all.
So what you're saying is unique, and
It
you
is
didn't do a
unique.
local bill because somebody has advised that.
And, yes, it is unique, as seen as so, Representative Boyd.
Okay.
All right, I have a motion. Who made the motion?
Emmett.
All right, second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, likewise. Bill's given a fair report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members.
All right, I hear a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned.
No, sir.
All right, so I'm just showing this up. Can I have
That's right, okay. I'll take it off.
Which way are we meeting in? I saw it.
What time is it? Yes, would you please, just gather the people?
I would love that, 'cause I'm
Yeah.
I'll send you a reverse. Okay, yeah, do that.
Well, she's actually.
I think our policy is much higher. The city of Fairfield
think, you know, you were on this one, I know you had an interest in that.
But actually, that does good because